It was a night as dark as pitch, the sort of darkness that seems to swallow sound. My old Ford rattled along the dirt road, its headlights barely cutting through the thick fog. I had been driving for hours, my destination a small, forgotten town nestled deep in the woods. It was supposed to be a short cut, but with each passing mile, I felt more lost than before. The radio had stopped working miles back, leaving only a static hum to keep me company. I glanced at the fuel gauge, the needle ominously hovering near empty. Just my luck, I thought, to run out of gas in the middle of nowhere. As I rounded a bend, the car sputtered, coughed, and finally rolled to a stop. Great, just great, I muttered, my breath fogging up the windshield. Stepping out into the chill, I shivered as the cold air bit through my jacket. The trees loomed overhead, their branches like the fingers of ghosts, reaching out to snatch unwary travelers. I decided to walk, hoping to find some sign of life, or at least a place where I could get some signal on my phone. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the crunch of gravel under my shoes and the distant howl of a wolf. I hadn't walked more than a mile when I saw it, a faint light flickering through the trees. Relief washed over me. Perhaps it was a house where I could ask for help. As I approached, the light grew stronger, revealing a decrepit mansion, its windows dark and empty, like the eyes of a skull. Why had I felt relieved again? The place looked straight out of a horror movie. The gate creaked ominously as I pushed it open, its rusty hinges protesting loudly. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. I climbed the steps to the front door, which hung ajar, inviting or warning, I couldn't tell. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling slightly. No answer came, only the sound of my own breathing. I stepped inside, the air stale and cold, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The hall was lined with portraits, their eyes seeming to follow me as I moved. A grand staircase spiraled up into darkness. I should have turned back, but curiosity, that reckless guide, urged me on. Upstairs, the corridor was narrow and the floorboards creaked with every step. Doors lined the hallway, each one shut tight. I reached for a doorknob, my hand shaking. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a room shrouded in shadows. As my eyes adjusted, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a figure standing by the window, staring out into the night. I froze, too scared to move, too scared to breathe. The figure turned slowly, and I could see it was a woman, her face pale and her eyes hollow. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "Why have you come here?" I tried to speak, but my words caught in my throat. She moved closer, her movements unnaturally smooth. "You shouldn't be here," she continued, her voice a chilling caress. "No one who comes here ever leaves." Panic surged through me, my heart racing. I backed away, stumbling over a loose floorboard. The woman laughed, a sound that was both beautiful and terrifying. I turned and ran, fleeing back down the hallway, the echoes of her laughter chasing me. Down the stairs, through the hall, out the door, I didn't stop running until I was back at the gate. I didn't dare look back, fear propelling me forward. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, until I reached my car, still sitting quietly in the dark. As I fumbled for my keys, I heard it, a soft, whispering voice, right behind me. "You can never leave," it said, and I spun around. Nothing was there, just the whispering wind and the rustling trees. I got into the car, locking the doors, my entire body shaking. I tried the ignition, not expecting anything, but to my surprise, the engine roared to life. I didn't hesitate, pushing the pedal to the floor, the car lurching forward. I didn't stop until I reached the main road, the mansion disappearing behind me, swallowed by the fog and the night. But even as I drove away, a cold dread lingered. The woman's words echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain. No one who comes here ever leaves. I shuddered, a chill running down my spine. I wanted to believe I had escaped, but as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw it, just for a moment, a shadow in the back seat, a whisper of movement. Then nothing. The road stretched on, the night endless and dark. My headlights cut through the fog, but the darkness seemed to press in, suffocating. I knew then that it wasn't over, that it would never be over. The house had let me go, but something had followed me out of the darkness, something that wasn't bound by the walls of that old mansion. As I drove, the temperature dropped, the air growing colder, the frost creeping over the windows. I turned up the heater, but it did little to warm me. The cold was inside me now, a frozen terror that clung to my bones. The cold seemed to seep deeper into my bones each mile I drove away from that cursed mansion. The heater sputtered weakly against the frost that now covered the inside of the windshield. Wiping it with my sleeve, I tried to focus on the road ahead, but my thoughts were scattered, haunted by the memory of her hollow eyes. Every shadow seemed to shift as I glanced around, my nerves on edge. The radio, previously dead, suddenly crackled to life. A voice, soft and melodic, filled the car, singing a lullaby that chilled my blood. "Sleep, child, sleep," it crooned, the signal wavering as if carried from a great distance. I slammed the power button, silencing the eerie song, but the melody lingered, echoing in my mind. I drove through the night, the road endless before me. My eyes grew heavy, sleep tugging at the edges of my consciousness despite the terror that gripped me. It was then that I saw it again, the shadow in the back seat, a mere whisper of darkness, but unmistakably there. "Leave me alone!" I shouted, my voice cracking. There was no response, only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the wind whistling past the car. At the edge of breaking down, I pulled over at a gas station, desperate for any human contact, any sign that the normal world still existed. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stepped out, the chill air slapping me awake. Inside, the attendant glanced up, a bored expression on his face. "Rough night?" he asked, eyeing my disheveled appearance. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I replied, my voice hollow. I stocked up on coffee and snacks, my hands shaking as I handed over the money. As I turned to leave, I thought I saw a flicker of movement behind me, reflected in the glass door. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, just rows of snacks and the flickering fluorescent light. Back on the road, the coffee did little to ease the cold that had settled deep inside me. The shadows grew longer as the night waned, the darkness before dawn pressing in. Every mile seemed to draw out longer than the last, the landscape around me bleak and unchanging. As the first light of dawn began to break the horizon, my relief was palpable. Surely the sunlight would banish these horrors, these shadows that haunted me. But as the light grew stronger, so did the presence in the back seat. I could almost hear it breathing, feel its gaze upon the back of my neck. I refused to look, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The sun rose fully, its rays spilling over the landscape, but the cold within me did not abate. If anything, it deepened, a bone-deep chill that no sun seemed capable of thawing. The landscape around me blurred as tears welled in my eyes, tears of frustration and fear. "What do you want from me?" I cried out, the question tearing from my throat. There was no answer, only the silent hum of the road beneath the tires. But in my heart, I felt a pull, a tugging that seemed to guide me not just along the road, but towards a destiny I could not escape. The miles passed, and signs for my home appeared, each one a promise of safety, a light I told myself to keep driving. As I turned onto my street, the familiar sights did little to ease the dread that clung to me. My house looked different now, shadowed and ominous. I parked in the driveway, my hands trembling as I killed the engine. The door to my house stood slightly ajar, welcoming or warning, I couldn't tell. With a deep breath, I opened the car door and stepped out, the gravel crunching underfoot. The air was silent, too silent. No birds sang, no leaves rustled. I walked to the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, the air was cool and still, as if the house had been holding its breath, waiting for my return. "I'm home," I announced, my voice sounding strange in the quiet. No reply came, the silence stretching out until it was almost a physical presence in the room. I moved from room to room, each one empty yet filled with the echoes of a life that once felt safe and normal. In the living room, the curtains fluttered slightly, though there was no wind. My eyes were drawn to the fireplace, where the ashes of a long-dead fire still lay. It was then I heard it, a whisper, soft as the sigh of the wind. "You are home," it murmured, the voice both familiar and utterly alien. I spun around, my eyes scanning the room, but there was nothing to see. Yet, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. "You are home, but you are not alone," the voice continued, each word a chilling caress against my mind. I backed away, bumping into a table and sending a vase crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking china was like a gunshot in the silence. I ran then, up the stairs to my room, the place I had always felt safest. But as I entered, the window curtains billowed as if in a gale, though the air was still. I turned to face the room, my breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. And there, in the mirror, I saw it, my reflection, pale and drawn, and behind me, another figure, shadowy and indistinct. I spun around, but there was nothing there, nothing I could see. Yet, in the mirror, the figure remained, a dark silhouette that watched me with unseen eyes. The whisper came again, closer now, almost a caress. "You cannot escape what you brought with you." The truth of the words hit me like a physical blow. Whatever I had unleashed at that mansion, whatever had followed me, it was here now, a part of my home, a part of me. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the rug and falling to the floor. The figure in the mirror stepped forward, reaching out with a hand that was both mine and not mine. As I watched, paralyzed, it touched the glass, the surface rippling like water under its fingers. "You are home," it whispered once more, "but you are never alone." And as I lay there, the room around me seemed to darken, the shadows growing deeper, until all that was left was the cold, the whisper, and the darkness that embraced me. The darkness seemed to tighten around me, as if the very shadows were alive, breathing in sync with my own labored breaths. I lay there, frozen, my eyes fixed on the figure in the mirror, its hands still pressed against the glass. The chill in the air deepened, and I could see my breath, a visible mist in the gloom of my bedroom. "What do you want from me?" I managed to gasp, my voice a broken whisper. The figure in the mirror tilted its head, considering my question with a slow, deliberate malice. "Everything," it replied, its voice a chilling echo of my own. The word hung in the air, heavy with dread. The figure's hand moved, tracing a cold line down the glass, as if it were caressing my soul. Scrambling to my feet, I backed away, the carpet muffling my steps. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. I had to get out of the house, I thought desperately. I needed to escape this nightmare. I turned and ran, my footsteps loud in the empty house. As I reached the stairs, The air shifted, the temperature plummeting further, and I felt it, a whisper of movement, as though something had swept past me. I stumbled, catching myself on the banister, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The house was no longer my sanctuary, it was a prison crafted from my own fears. Descending the stairs, I entered the living room. The curtains fluttered again, this time more violently, as if angered by my attempt to flee. "You cannot run from what is inside you," the voice hissed, seeming to come from the walls themselves. I spun around, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, searching for the source of the voice. "No, this is my home," I shouted into the darkness, my voice more forceful now. "You are not welcome here." But even as I spoke, doubt gnawed at me. The entity had followed me from that cursed mansion, or had it been with me even before? I moved quickly to the front door, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle. It was cold, unnaturally so, and I recoiled at the touch. The door slammed shut on its own, the sound a definitive clap that echoed through the house. Trapped, I thought, a panic rising in my throat. Turning, I faced the interior of my home, the place I had lived for years, now a strange and menacing labyrinth. The air crackled with a palpable tension, an electric charge that seemed to hum through the very walls. I could feel it watching me, the presence that lurked in the mirrors, the shadows, the quietest corners of the room. "Show yourself," I demanded, my voice cracking with fear and anger. "Face me." For a moment, there was silence, a pregnant pause in which the house itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, laughter, low and menacing, filled the room. It was not the laugh of a single being but many, as if a chorus of the damned were mocking my plight. The temperature dropped further, breaths of frost forming in the air around me, and then I saw them, apparitions, specters of shadow and mist, swirling around the room. They were formless at first, but as my eyes adjusted, I could see they were human-like, each one distinct yet terrifying. "You are not alone," they whispered, their voices overlapping, a cacophony of despair. "You will never be alone again." The specters moved closer, their forms becoming more defined, their faces twisted in expressions of sorrow and pain. I backed away, my mind reeling with terror. These were not just ghosts, they were manifestations of every fear, every dread I had ever felt. As they advanced, the house seemed to close in around me. The walls pulsed with a dark energy, the wood groaning under the weight of unseen forces. I felt a hand, cold and insubstantial, brush against my arm, its touch a promise of nightmares to come. I ran, not knowing where I could possibly go in my own home to escape these horrors. Room after room, the specters followed, a relentless pursuit that drove me to the edge of madness. "Leave me be," I screamed, my voice hoarse with fear. But they only laughed, their haunting mirth a sound that would forever echo in the darkest corners of my mind. In the kitchen, I grabbed a knife, the cold steel a small comfort in my trembling hand. I knew it was futile, but I had to try something, anything. Facing the gathering shadows, I brandished the weapon, a feeble defense against the encroaching darkness. "You cannot fight what you fear," the voice taunted, now so close I could almost feel its breath upon my neck. "You cannot destroy what dwells within." Desperate, I lunged forward, swinging the knife through the swirling mist. It passed through without resistance, the specters unharmed, their forms simply reforming like smoke in the wind. They encircled me, tighter and tighter, their icy grips like chains around my limbs. As I stood there, surrounded and overwhelmed, I realized the truth that had eluded me all this time. The horror was not just in my house or in the shadows, it was inside me, woven into the very fabric of my being. I could not escape it, for wherever I went, it would surely follow. The realization hit me like a wave, drowning me in a sea of despair. The knife clattered to the floor, its sound lost amidst the whispering of the specters. They were closer now, so close I could see the hollows where their eyes should be, feel the chill emanating from their ethereal bodies. "You belong to us," they whispered, their voices a chilling symphony. "You always have." The room spun, the shadows deepening, the cold biting deeper into my soul. I felt myself slipping, falling into an abyss from which there would be no return. But even as the darkness claimed me, I knew this was not the end. It was only a deeper descent into the nightmare, a continuation of the horror that had claimed me from that first fateful night at the mansion. The icy grip of the specters tightened, their whispers now a deafening roar in my ears. "Accept us," they hissed, their forms blurring into one vast shadow that enveloped me. I struggled against their hold, but each movement was more futile than the last. The cold had seeped into my very bones, a chill that no fire could warm. Desperation clawed at my mind, a frantic, pulsing terror. There was no escape, no corner of my own home that offered refuge. The realization that I might never be free again was suffocating. "No!" I shouted, my voice breaking. "This is not how it ends." Summoning every ounce of will left in me, I closed my eyes and envisioned the light, any light. I remembered the sun's warmth, the way it played through the leaves on a bright, clear day. I held on to that image, focusing all my thoughts on it as if I could will it into existence. To my astonishment, a warmth began to spread through me, faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. The shadows recoiled, hissing as if burned by the mere thought of light. "Impossible," they screeched, their forms twisting in agony. I opened my eyes, and there, in the palm of my hand, a small orb of light glowed softly. Emboldened, I rose to my feet, the light in my hand casting long shadows across the kitchen. "I am not yours to claim," I declared, my voice steady now, resonant with a newfound strength. The light grew brighter, filling the room, pushing back the darkness. The specters writhed, their forms dissipating like smoke in a strong wind. "You cannot defy us," they wailed, their voices now tinged with fear. But I could, and I would. I stepped forward, the light from my hand now blazing like a beacon. "I defy you," I said, each word a strike against the darkness that sought to envelop me. One by one, the specters vanished, their cries echoing in the suddenly empty air. The cold receded, warmth flooding back into the room as if the very house were sighing in relief. The light in my hand flickered once, twice, then stabilized, a warm, steady glow that felt like hope. I moved through the house, the light leading the way. Each room brightened as I entered, the shadows of fear and despair chased away by the simple, powerful glow. When I reached the living room, I paused. The curtains blew gently in a breeze I hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity. The outside world was waiting for me, real and bright. With a deep breath, I opened the front door. The morning sun streamed in, blinding after the darkness of my ordeal. I stepped outside, the grass wet with dew under my feet, the air fresh and clean. I turned back to look at the house, half expecting to see it as I had left it, shrouded in shadow. But it was just my home, nothing more. I walked down the driveway, each step lighter than the last. The street was quiet, the world waking up around me. Neighbors jogged by, nodded greetings, dogs barked in the distance. Life, normal and wonderfully mundane, continued around me. As I reached the end of the street, I looked back one last time. The house stood serene, bathed in the light of the new day. I knew I would never be entirely free of the darkness. Such things leave marks on your soul. But I had faced my fears, stood against the shadows, and emerged into the light. Turning away, I started down the street, the light in my hand dimming until it was gone, absorbed back into the world where it belonged. The nightmare was over, the day was bright, and I was alive. I would carry the scars, yes, but also the knowledge that even in the deepest darkness, there can be light. If only one has the courage to make it so. And with that, I walked into the day, the horrors of the night laid to rest, a story ended.